up with ideas to try and start my own business. And probably the most harebrained story of all comes from when I was about 10 years old, and I visited a chicken farm with my childhood friend. And we convinced this farmer to give us a box of eggs, which we took home to my mum and dad, and explained that we had this great business idea that we would keep the eggs warm so they would hatch, and we would start a chicken farm in the back garden. And as I'm sure you can imagine, my parents were delighted with this idea of having chickens running around everywhere. But they let us give it a shot, not really expecting two 10-year-olds to find a way of hatching eggs. And so we put the box of eggs on top of the TV, where it was kind of warm. And amazingly, a few weeks later, 4 of these eggs hatched into little chickens. And I mean, the poor things probably thought that Jerry Springer was their mum, you know. We raised them in the house and gave them names, and soon we put them out into the back garden and they started laying eggs, which we sold to the neighbours. So that was my first ever business at the age of 10. Unfortunately though, my career as a chicken farmer was sadly ended one afternoon when the local fox decided to eat my chickens for dinner. And as tragic and upsetting as that day was, it didn't put me off entirely. And I continued to come up with more and more ideas to try and start my own business. And so one afternoon when I was 14 years old, I was visiting my grandmother, and she was making jam in her kitchen just in the same way as she had for as long as I can remember. That's a picture of my gran there. She's the one in the middle. I got really excited about it and asked my gran to teach me how to make jam. We spent the afternoon making a few jars together, and the same day I ran around to the supermarket and bought some fruit and made a few jars of my own. And before they'd even cooled down, I took them around the neighbourhood and asked the neighbours what they thought. And thankfully the neighbours at least told me that they enjoyed the first few jars of jam that I had ever made, and asked if they could start buying it from me every couple of weeks. So I was soon delivering my homemade jam out of a little plastic bucket door to door all over the local area. I came up with some labels on the computer at home, and after a while, the local newspaper heard about this story of a young guy taking his gran's jam recipes and making a little business out of them. And that's an article from page 3 of the Edinburgh Evening News from when I was about 15 years old, which probably just meant there wasn't very much happening in town that day for something like that to make it into the paper. But following the excitement of being written about in the paper, I decided to start working full-time on trying to turn my jam-making hobby into my career. And so I soon found myself cooking jam all day, every day, in my parents' tiny little kitchen, cooking up to 1,000 jars of jam a week and selling them at farmers' markets all over Scotland. Soon it got to the point where my parents couldn't get into the kitchen to cook the dinner anymore, and I realised that I would have to come up with some kind of big idea in order to move production into a factory. And so I started doing a lot of research, and I found out that sales of jam have been in decline for the past couple of decades. Mostly because jam is very unhealthy, it's maybe 70% sugar, and I guess when I looked at all of the brands of jam on the supermarket shelves, I figured they were kind of traditional, maybe boring, and I just figured I could try and come up with something healthier and more modern and more fun. And so hundreds of batches and dozens of recipes later in my parents' tiny little kitchen, I came up with a way of making jam 100% from fruit, without adding any sugar or anything artificial. I soon had a few flavours that I thought tasted pretty nice, and probably quite naively decided I was going to try and sell them to the big supermarkets. And that was something a teenager had never done before, so I was invited along to a Waitrose Meet the Buyer Day. And Waitrose are one of the big supermarkets